Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alexia Tasouli, and I'm a diplomatic correspondent. And in this panel, we're going to focus on Egypt, on the important role that Egypt is playing in this turbulence area in terms of security, diplomacy, energy, and economy. So it's a very honor for us that we have here in this panel Dr. Abdel Latif, who is the Executive Director and Director of Research in the Egyptian Center for Economic Studies in Egypt. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Khalid Emara, who is a former Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs in Egypt. Good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
And Mr. Karim Haggag, who is Professor of Practice, School of Global Affairs and Public Policy in the American University in Cairo. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, all of you. We will start from Dr. Alba. And my first question, of course, it's about Egypt, the important role Egypt is playing in the area. But I would like to focus on the economy, because the economy is a crucial part on how the situation is evolving in the Middle East, in the developments and in the negotiation. How would you describe the situation in terms of aspect of the Egypt?
Okay. Thank you very much for the question and for addressing Egypt. Actually, I thank Delphi for addressing Egypt in a session of its own, and it's very important. The effect of the economy comes actually at different levels. The one that's most direct, the minute you have insecurity and disruption in a region, the first sector that's immediately affected is tourism. People simply don't want to go to the entire region altogether. And this has affected Egypt, of course, by reducing the number of tourists. It has also affected the incoming and inflowing investments for exactly the same reason. The mistrust immediately stops a lot of things. There is, of course, the effect that took place on the Suez Canal, because of the disruption to the vessels and because of disruption to the whole value chains, the global value chains. And this reduced the revenue that's actually coming to Egypt because of the Houthis attacks, etc., etc. On other geopolitical issues, the situation in Sudan, there is a big inflow of Sudanese to Egypt. And Egypt has the advantage of not dealing with incomers as refugees. We do not have refugee camps. They become citizens and benefit from all the advantages that we, all Egyptians, benefit from. So this also puts pressure on Egypt. And this whole thing is putting pressure on our revenues from foreign currency at a time when we had actually economic problems of our own. We had accumulation of external debt, and decrease in the value of the currency, things that we've been working on in the last few years. The situation is better from the economic point of view, but of course, what's happening in the region is affecting Egypt. But there's something that's very important that I want to add. The effect is not only on Egypt, the effect is negatively on the entire world through its effect on Egypt. Because what's happening, the issues with the trade routes and the flow, the circulation in the Red Sea at a time when the world is going towards nearshoring, where there are lots of migrating investments that are coming from China and from Europe, benefiting from the lower cost of labor and the lower cost of energy that we have, and opportunities of investment in green hydrogen in the Suez Canal economic zone. All of this is not happening at the extent that it should be happening. So the negative effect on Egypt is actually a negative effect on the welfare of the world. The world is shooting itself in the foot by not addressing the elephant in the room, which is the situation, the geopolitical situation in the Middle East.
Right. So I will come back to you again, because you mentioned that the negative effect of Egypt in the revenues, in the economy, affects globally and in political terms. So that's giving the opportunity, Mr. Emara, to focus more on politics. And I would like to ask you, what's the role of Egypt in politics in the area, having in mind that there is the pressure from the international community for immediate return to ceasefire?
You know, Egypt is a big regional player in its own region for centuries. Now, it is the core of dealing with also other regional players that are very important. Turkey, Iran in our region. We have Saudi Arabia also in its own right in the Gulf area. These are important players that can bring back stability in the region, that can bring back a sense of regenerated regionalism, working together for stabilizing that region, for reinstituting the nation state that is shattered in the last decade and a half because of interventions in internal affairs, because of a sense of instituting a certain ideology to lead politically the region and so forth. On the role that we can play, we are already a very important player, with Europe. We have strategic relation with Europe. We have a strategic relation with the United States, with the BRICS countries. We are a member in the BRICS, I would say, configuration of the global South. We are also a very important player in terms of our African
the other countries,
links, leadership in the continent, and also contributing to development in the continent, which is adjacent to Europe, which is very important for a wider stability of that region, and of course in the Arab world, naturally, and in the Islamic world. This gives Egypt, a very important role in terms of speaking to everybody. It's able to reach out to countries, from the east, from the west, from the south, and of course in its own national security important areas that it occupies. I think this is a very, very important contribution in terms of its role also in peace and war in its region. Egypt have chartered peace negotiations in the region, have made the best and the largest contribution to moving from a confrontation between the Arab world and Israel in our region to peace agreements and so forth. And unfortunately, all this work through decades of forging this very fragile new relation is undermined by what we see in the region in terms of destabilizing countries all around. And I think Europe did not play the important role of being a stabilizing force through the decade and a half that I mentioned at the beginning. Actually, we have seen a situation where the European interventions have brought about the disintegration of several polities in the region in the last 15 years. And I don't mean only Europe. I mean, this is also a policy that has been pursued also by Washington and by other players in this period. Now, to be able to speak about how we can bring about a sanity again, we need to address the major issue of the Palestinian future, Palestinian state. Without addressing that particular strive of the Palestinians that have been fighting for their freedom for the past 75 years, I think most of the efforts in the region will fall into I would say, despair and maybe postponing for another crisis that will take place and will be much graver than what we have seen now. And there where I see definitely an important role that Europeans can play together with us in the region, and particularly with Egypt, in terms of building a coalition that would support a just and fair solution to the Palestinian issue. Ceasefire, of course, is a very important first step, but the world have been, and especially in the West, have been very silent about the atrocities that have been committed in this conflict vis-a-vis the Palestinians, particularly in Gaza and now in the West Bank, for more than 16 months now. We have seen a genocide basically playing on social media, and very little in terms of addressing the moral issues behind that, the human issues behind that, but also the political issues behind that. And without this courageous step that we need to do together in the future, we would have a recurrent situation in the Middle East, and we would have even more severe confrontations in the Middle East in the future, because the Middle East is an area of 600 million people, mostly young people, that are basically searching for development, they're searching for peace, they're searching for opportunities, and so forth. And conflict and the depth of these kind of existential confrontations would lead definitely to a situation where coexistence would become almost an impossibility in our region between the three major religions, which has been always the case in our region. This region is made, of the mosaic of so many different ethnicities, so many different, I would say, very subtle differences between traditions, cultures, and religions, and so forth. And it has been the cradle of civilization. So its importance is of paramount to the whole world, not only to, let's say, a country like Egypt that is at the heart of this region, and it is one of the oldest civilizations that have contributed to all its development through the ages.
Thank you so much. Professor, Mr. Emara mentioned about the issue of Palestinian people and their future. I would like your analysis on that. How do you see the developments and the role of Egypt, take into consideration, as Mr. Emara said, that Egypt has a strong voice in the negotiation when they talk with European partners or with the American state?
Thank you very much, Alexia, and thank you for having me on this panel. So yes, as my colleague Khalid mentioned, Gaza is only one manifestation of what we have seen over the course of the last 15 years, which is the breakdown of the two-state solution. Egypt has historically seen the Palestinian issue as central to the cause of peace and stability in the region, which is why Egypt has always tried to push a political process that could lead to eventually peace based on a two-state solution between Israel and the future Palestinian state. What we have seen in Gaza is truly troubling in that, as Khalid mentioned, it not only exacerbates the instability in addition to the moral injustice that we have seen play out in Gaza, but it also undermines the very basis of future coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. So Egypt has always played a historic role in attempting to stabilize the situation in Gaza. What we have seen lately is only the latest of multiple rounds of armed conflict between Israel and Hamas. However, this time Egypt has recognized that the challenge is much more difficult and much more dangerous. We've seen in Gaza today the immense scale of the destruction. We have seen open calls for ethnic cleansing from Gaza into Egypt, and that provides a very dangerous precedent for ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. And we have seen this conflict take on existential terms. So we've seen really maximalist objectives by Israel in this conflict, and no political horizon that would pave the way for a political process in the aftermath. So Egypt has had to take on really an added responsibility, going beyond just its traditional role of a ceasefire and reconstruction. So Egypt has recognized that this time the ceasefire needs to be more structured. So there needs to be guarantees, there needs to be observation of the ceasefire. Egypt has set a red line on the issue of ethnic cleansing in Gaza, both because of its moral implications, but also because of its very destabilizing security implications. And Egypt has taken a role in really presenting a vision for the aftermath, for the day after in Gaza. So what we have seen come out of the Arab Summit is the adoption of a very ambitious, but really the only realistic path for Gaza, which is a plan for reconstruction, a plan for governance in Gaza after the conflict, a plan for the initiation of a political track in the aftermath of the conflict. So really a very comprehensive vision for the day after in Gaza. And that has been missing so far for the duration of this conflict over the last 15 months. So this is a very added burden that Egypt has had to undertake, and it's really in line with its historic role with respect to Israeli-Palestinian peace in general.
Right. Thank you. I will come back to you regarding the energy and the geopolitics. Dr. Abla, you mentioned before the Suez Corridor, and I would like to explain us more how is the situation regarding the corridors and the importance of the Suez Canal in the area.
Yes, thank you very much. Let me just add something that Karim said right now. You're talking about the day after. The day after is not there yet and will never be there unless not a ceasefire, but actually a fair solution, two-state solution on proper principles of the right of the Palestinians for the land. This is the elephant in the room that the world is not addressing and shooting itself in the foot. Part of shooting itself in the foot actually has to do with those trade routes and those corridors that emerged in the region following actually the conflict as a way around the Suez Canal because of the Houthis issues. So the vessels had to go through the Cape of Good Hope. So they said, let's have a corridor. And IMEC came up. And IMEC is India, Middle East, Europe corridor. And it's supposed to be linking Europe to Asia. The idea is to go from Europe to Haifa in Israel, then to Saudi, and then Emirates, and then to India. Okay? There is a very big problem with this corridor and others along the same lines, and there is a very strong economic argument here. Economics is about efficiency, and it is about reducing cost. Now, those corridors are being built because of a situation that's temporary, no matter how long it is. So there are investments, huge investments that are going to be thrown in here. They will become a deadweight loss. No one will benefit from them. The minute things are secure, security is secured, which is to the benefit of everybody. Everybody will go back to the Suez Canal, which is the shortest route, the maritime route with heavy cargoes, okay, that has the lowest cost. So there is a danger of throwing the political garbage into economic garbage, translated into economic garbage that affects businesses. This is my first point. My second point, in doing those corridors, they are being sold politically more than economically by comparing IMEC, for example, to the Suez Canal, which is a wrong comparison because you're comparing apples and oranges. The Suez Canal is a maritime route. IMEC has part maritime, part trains, part roads. There is multiple handling here, which is very costly. The transactional costs are huge, okay? The capacity of a train does not exceed 50,000 tons. The capacity of a vessel is 200,000 tons. So we are talking about something that's completely different. So you cannot compare and say, oh, this is going to be 10 days instead of 15 days, okay? This is my second point. My third point, and it's the most important, even if we talk about an alternative route that would never replace the Suez Canal, but can be additional, if you want, if you're talking about an open buffet of routes for businesses, okay, then IMEC is not the most efficient one. And if you want it to be efficient, it has to be IMEC Egypt and not just IMEC, okay? And France, actually, is very seriously talking about this. And in Macron's visit, there is actually an actual paragraph that was written about it, that Egypt has to be part of it. Why so? Because you can go from Europe to Alexandria, Egypt, on trains to Safaga, which is another port, cross the Red Sea in what is called train vessels, which are vessels that carry the trains to Saudi, go on another railway route all the way. So there is no multiple handling. The railway is there. Actually, Egypt got indebted because of our investments in the infrastructure, so there is evidence that it is there. okay? So there is no multiple handling. It is ready to be used, okay? It's not through the Suez Canal, so there are no conflicts. It gives Europe access to Africa and access to investment everywhere else. It gives them access to the economic zones in Egypt, and it can start right away, and it's far from the conflicts. So it's a shame that the world punishes itself, specifically Europe punishes itself by getting involved and by mixing the economics and the politics, and again shooting itself in the foot again and again. Instead, solve the elephant in the room, please. Restore security, restore the rights of the Palestinians.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting what you said, because energy is a combination of economics and diplomacy and politics. And that gives me the opportunity to go to Mr. Emara, because to focus on Eastern Mediterranean, on energy diplomacy. I remember we had the East Med pipeline, which has been declared but hasn't been done yet. And Greece, Cyprus, and Israel have signed to build the electric cable under the sea, which is maybe very challenging on economic terms, but on political terms is very important. How would you describe the energy diplomacy in Eastern Mediterranean?
Energy, of course, is what makes the world go around. So we're talking about traditional energy, but we're talking about renewable energy and interconnectivity, you know, and let's say a give and take between our peak production and consumption and different peaks of consumption and production in Europe. I think, you know, the East Mediterranean is a privileged area where it will see these connectivity, you know, in terms of electricity grids, in terms of pipelines, in terms of collection also of the gas reserves. Most of them are processed in Egyptian factories before they become LNG and they're sent to Europe, because these are the only terminals that exist in the East Mediterranean that are viable and that are economical also. But I go again to the core issue, which is security and stability and peace. Europe was not able to secure its future and the EU without the coal and steel agreements after the Second World War, without agreements and turning the page between France and Germany, and putting the European on the course of peace for 50, 60, 70 years until we have the Ukrainian crisis. Now, the Middle East, we have started 40, 50 years ago the process of pacifying the Middle East, of ending the big confrontation between Egypt and Israel, having the Camp David Accords and the peace treaties. Part of them were self-determination for the Palestinians, never achieved, brushed aside. Wars have started after these peace agreements in Lebanon, in other parts of the Middle East. Now we have even other rounds of wars, other rounds of occupation of parts of Syria, of different areas, of trying, you know, to root out the Palestinian and cleanse them out of the land and so forth. And this is supported, unfortunately, by the collective West, by the silence that we have seen all through these months. Young people that we have talked about and the future of all these continents in the future, they have seen it all on their gadgets, on their phones. Nobody can deny, you know, the atrocities that have been committed in trying to impose a situation that is not possible, that is not attainable. And without solving these issues, these core issues of peace and war in the Middle East that is adjacent to Europe, Europe will find itself in a situation where it will be pulled into these conflicts sooner or later at a much more costly situation for its own citizens. For the young people that were in the previous sessions, we were talking about them, how are you going to send them to defend their countries? To defend their countries, people today are leaving their countries to become foreign fighters in our region. They are leaving Europe to become foreign fighters in our region. And the European governments are keeping them in our region in prisons in certain countries in our region, not to come back to Europe. I don't think Europe wants to repeat this situation at a bigger scale in the coming decades. and then see the East Mediterranean, instead of being an area of cooperation and collaboration and win-win situation, into an area of extended conflicts that would definitely affect European stability and European prosperity going forward. So I believe, the energy issues, the infrastructure is there, the possibilities are there, the exchange is already there. We have agreements already with Greece, we have agreements with Cyprus, we have agreements with Italy, with other players. France is also, and Spain, they have agreements, in the South Mediterranean, with Algeria and with Morocco and so forth. So there is multiple opportunities for all of us to benefit, but there has to be an understanding that without resolving the issue of how to bring stability and peace to this troubled region quickly, through recognition of the core issues and the basic issues of finding a solution to Palestinian self-determination and Palestinian statehood, we will always remain in this situation where conflict will re-emerge and where emboldened other countries will become involved in this wider conflict. And we see that, through other players, in Russia, and of course Iran and Turkey and other players, that have definitely become engaged in some of these situations that are unfolding, and the space that is left in this vacuum in our region.
Thank you very much. Professor, I would like to stay more on energy, and I would like your opinion to ask you, what do you think Egypt's position is regarding the cable, the undersea cable that Israel, Cyprus, and Greece have signed? And we see that Turkey, because you mentioned Turkey before, has objections regarding this cable, objection that links to the Cyprus issue. What's your position on that?
Yeah, thank you, Alexia. So the broader context for the initiative to establish these interconnectors is, of course, the emergence of the Mediterranean as a distinct aspect of Egypt's foreign policy. So, and this goes back to what my colleague Khalid was alluding to in terms of Egypt's vision for building a framework for regional cooperation in the Eastern Mediterranean centered on energy. That goes back, of course, to Egypt's initiative to establish the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. And the approach with respect to that initiative was to provide a forum for both producers and consumers of gas to cooperate to leverage the region's recently discovered hydrocarbon resources in terms of the offshore natural gas finds. Egypt's approach with respect to this initiative was really born out of a vision for establishing Egypt as a regional energy hub. So Egypt as an aggregator of regional gas, Israeli gas, Cypriot gas, Egyptian gas, for re-export to Europe through Egypt's LNG facilities on Egypt's northern coast. And that, I think, has proven to be a framework with tremendous potential that Egypt is trying to advance. And it's in that context that Egypt has furthered this vision through the projects related to the interconnectors. So Egypt and Greece signed a very ambitious MOU in 2021 for the establishment of an electricity interconnector. We are talking of a subsea connector that runs for more than 950 kilometers, so a very ambitious project. The transmission is set to reach 6 gigawatts per year. So that's, again, quite an ambitious target. 75% of the output of the cable is meant to be generated by renewable energy. So again, very much in line with Europe's vision for the green transition and Egypt's ambition, of course, to advance its objectives with regards to decarbonization. Interestingly, that is only one of the projected interconnectors. There's also another projected interconnector between Egypt and Greece, also similarly ambitious, also aligned with Europe's green transition. So this is very much an ambitious project in its own right, but I think it's important to put it in context that this is very much a part of Egypt's vision for a regional cooperative framework for the Eastern Mediterranean. And I think that establishes an approach that can really provide for these win-win solutions. Now, you mentioned Turkey. Turkey is no doubt a very pivotal player when it comes to the Eastern Mediterranean and, of course, the Middle East as a whole. There are differences between Turkey and its neighbors with regards to EEZ delimitation. I think it's very encouraging that there has been an on-again, off-again dialogue between Turkey and Greece with regards to the delimitation issue, both in the Aegean and in the Eastern Mediterranean. Needless to say that reaching the full potential of the region for future cooperation will depend on resolving these differences. Again, that is very much the approach that Egypt has undertaken with regards to its EEZ delimitation with its neighbors. We delimited our EEZ with Cyprus going back to the early 1980s. We've had a recent delimitation agreement with Greece. On both of these issues, we have taken very great care to preserve Turkey's interests with regards to its rights on the continental shelf. So we have left certain areas of our EEZ undelimited in anticipation of Turkey and Greece resolving their differences with regards to maritime delimitation. So, of course, we very much hope that these differences can be resolved, and that will no doubt maximize the potential for the region's cooperation moving forward.
Let me say, though, that the agreement of the limitation between Greece and Egypt was the focus was our bilateral relations. We didn't pay attention to what Turkey might say or might react. We paid attention to enhance our bilateral relations. Therefore, we signed the exclusive economic zone. Even it was partial signed. We agreed only to a certain point in the sea.
And it was partial out of a recognition that Turkey also has interests with regards to the delimitation. So leaving those undelimited areas open for an eventual agreement between Turkey and Greece.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here. Definitely our bilateral relations are very strong, mainly because of the exclusive economic zone, but also because the Greek community in Egypt is very strong also there. Thank you for being here in Greece. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ευχαριστώ για την προσοχή σας.